Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Miller, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Humanities at Prince George's Community College. Today, I'm going to be talking briefly about how to make your syllabus more accessible by creating hyperlinked content in order to promote inclusion in your classes. To start, I'd like to touch on a few aspects of accessibility. I know many of us are familiar with it, but I think that these aspects directly relate to the way that we design our syllabi to make them more accessible. To me, accessibility is empowerment. It's giving our students a sense of agency, a sense of ownership in their ability to learn and to be successful in our courses. Accessibility is also independence. We want our students to be able to independently access content in our syllabi, get the resources and the information that they need. Accessibility is also inclusion. I think we all want our students to be able to feel part of our classroom community as well as our campus community, even if they happen to be experiencing a disability. Finally, accessibility is just good design. When we design our courses to be accessible to all at the outset, and when we design our syllabi to be accessible, then later we do not have to go back and do a lot of revisions, a lot of adding of content, and that can be time consuming and costly. I decided to focus on the syllabus as the document that I wanted to make more accessible in my classes. What I discovered over the course of many semesters was that each semester I added more to my syllabus and more requirements, more expectations, and it began to feel like a fence that I was just building, and it was getting taller and taller, and my students had to climb higher and higher to get over it into my class. And I realized that I didn't want that. I really wanted my syllabus to be a welcoming, inviting, accessible document that my students would actually read. So instead of a fence, I wanted it to be more like a gate, a way in to my class where my students didn't feel like they had to overcome barriers just to, find out, get the information that they need. So that was my goal, and that's what I have been working on. One of the things I've done, and one of the things you can do in your syllabus, is to use hyperlinks. Hyperlinks can help students easily and quickly navigate content, get resources, find information. It removes, a few steps for them to be able to access the information that they need. So when you're including hyperlinks, you want to make sure that they make sense out of context, and you want to make sure that they're actually useful. We don't want to just throw hyperlinks in there, throw in links to just because it looks good or we think it's a good idea. There should be a purpose. You really need to have a goal in mind. And also you want your links to be concise. You want them to be descriptive. You don't want to use vague language when you're including a link. You want students to know where they're going. A lot of students use assistive technology, such as screen readers. And in this online environment, we often don't know how many students are using this type of technology. So that's why it's really important when we are including hyperlinks that we do it in a way that makes it easier for these students to access content in our syllabus. So I've created 4 tips for creating meaningful hyperlinks. Tip number 1 is to make sure that the text associated with the link is meaningful. So for example, we often see click here for more information about accommodations. Say that was a line in my syllabus. Well, the only issue with click here is that not everybody can use a mouse. So actually that language is not inclusive. But by doing the example that I put above, you can find more information about accommodations on the Disability Services website. This way, I brought them to the Disability Services website, but I've labeled it so they know where they're going. Both links take my students to the same place, but the first one is more descriptive and it's actually meaningful, and it is more inclusive of students who may not be able to use a mouse. Tip number 2 is don't display the actual URL as a link. If students are using assistive technology, often a screen reader, might read all of the letters and all the characters in a link. So if you want to include a link, once again, use descriptive and meaningful text, such as read this article on giving advice, instead of the article's URL, which is very lengthy. Tip number 3, if you think users will likely print the document, then include the URL after the link, but I suggest not hyperlinking it. So for example, Prince George's Community College, I have hyperlinked that, but if I think my students will print out the document, I will include the link to the right. And finally, tip number 4 is I would suggest using non-color indicators for hyperlinked text. So for example, visit the Writing Center, I have underlined and I've made colored text, that is a link, instead of visit the Writing Center with no underlining. Because the issue is color can work well for those of us who are sighted, who don't have any issues with sight. But for those who are not, or for folks who may need another indicator, we want to use either an icon or underlining to indicate that this is a link. This isn't just colored text. And if you use color and you use an icon or you use underlining for links in your syllabus, you want to make sure that it's consistent, that you use the same color and you use underlining for every link. That definitely helps students navigate all of the links in the syllabus more easily. This is just an example of what my syllabus looked like before and what it looks like after I've been working on implementing some accessible elements. So under required instructional materials, you'll see on the right side, the newer version of my syllabus. I've basically linked my textbook to the bookstore's website where my students can click on the link and purchase the book. I've also included a link to our e-learning site, the honors program on our campus, as well as the Disability Support Services Office. So by including these links, I've just reduced the time and effort it takes my students to access resources, campus resources, as well as textbook information. To wrap up today, I just wanted to share this quote from Mark Coppin. He's the Director of Disability Services at North Dakota State University. He said, once we have accessibility, we have possibility. I challenge you to move from making accommodations to making learning accessible for all. And as I've shared today, one way to do that is by creating hyperlinked content in our syllabi to make it a more welcoming, inviting, and accessible document. Thank you so much for viewing this presentation today. If you have any questions, my name again is Laura Miller. My email address is millerle@pgcc.edu, and I've also included some links to the resources that I used for this presentation. Thank you so much.